The heat was a living thing, a suffocating blanket that clung to Elias's skin, even as he stood on the rickety dock, staring out at the glassy surface of Lake Serenity. It was anything but serene. A strange, almost unnatural stillness hung over. The water, reflecting the bruised purple of the twilight sky, and not a single ripple disturbed its mirror-like perfection. This was supposed to be his escape, a week-long reprieve from the city's relentless hum. But as the last sliver of sun dipped below the distant tree line, a profound and unsettling quiet descended, a silence so deep it felt like a presence pressing in on him, whispering promises of forgotten things. He tried to shake off the growing unease, attributing it to exhaustion and the unfamiliar solitude. "Just a quiet old man," he muttered to himself, his voice sounding thin and reedy against the vast encroaching darkness. He turned back towards the small, isolated cabin, its single porch light casting a weak, flickering glow. As he did, a faint, almost imperceptible shimmer caught his eye on the lake's surface, far out in the center. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, leaving him to wonder if it was merely a trick of the fading light or something else entirely. The first night was restless. Every creak of the old cabin, every rustle of leaves outside, sounded amplified, distorted. He kept hearing a faint, rhythmic lapping sound from the lake, even though there was no wind. It was too regular, too deliberate to be natural, like something gently tapping against the underside of the dock. He tried to rationalize it, telling himself it was just the water settling, but the sound persisted, a soft, insistent rhythm that seemed to lull him into a state of heightened anxiety, his eyes wide open in the oppressive darkness out by morning. The air was still heavy, but a new unsettling detail emerged. Scattered along the shoreline, just at the water's edge, were dozens of small, smooth, perfectly white stones. Elias hadn't noticed them the day before, and their sheer number was perplexing. They seemed to form an irregular, almost deliberate pattern leading from the deeper water towards his cabin. He picked one up. It was cold to the touch, despite the rising sun, and felt oddly heavy, as if imbued with a strange, inert energy. He called his sister Lena, his voice tight with an apprehension he couldn't fully articulate. "Lena, something's off here. The lake and these stones. It's just weird." Lena, ever practical, chuckled. "Elias, it's a lake. Lakes have rocks. You're just not used to being out in the sticks. Relax, enjoy the peace and quiet." Her easy dismissal, though well-intentioned, only made him feel more isolated, more convinced that his growing dread was not merely imagination, but a chilling reality he was experiencing alone. That afternoon, while trying to distract himself with a book on the porch, he heard it, a faint, almost melodic hum coming from the lake. It was low, resonant, and seemed to vibrate through the very air, a sound that was both beautiful and deeply unsettling. It wasn't a boat or an animal. It was too pure, too sustained. He walked to the dock, peering out, but saw nothing. The hum continued, seeming to emanate from directly beneath the water, a siren song that pulled at something deep within him. "Did you hear that?" he whispered into the phone later that evening, his voice barely a breath. Mark, a friend who knew. The area sounded confused. Hear what, Elias? The crickets? Look, man, are you sure you're feeling okay? You sound spooked. Elias gripped the phone tighter. It's not crickets, Mark. It's like a song from the lake. And there are these stones everywhere. Mark's tone shifted, a hint of genuine concern replacing his earlier skepticism. The lake, you say? Elias, listen to me. Don't go near the water after dark. Just stay inside. Mark's sudden seriousness sent a fresh wave of terror through him. He knew the local legends, the whispers of things that lurked beneath the surface of forgotten lakes, but he had always dismissed them as old wives' tales. Now the hum intensified, growing louder, more insistent, and he could almost make out. Faint, ethereal voices woven into the melody, calling his name. Elias, come. Join us. They were soft, seductive, promising an end to his unease, a release into the cool, dark depths. He stumbled back from the dock, the voices growing louder, clearer, now accompanied by the rhythmic lapping sound, faster, more urgent. The air grew impossibly cold, and the faint shimmer he'd seen the first night returned, now a brilliant, pulsating light emanating from the center of the lake, illuminating the water from below. Shapes, indistinct and swirling, seemed to form within the light, reaching, beckoning. The summer night, once a symbol of warmth and freedom, had become a suffocating embrace of ancient horror. He scrambled into the cabin, slamming the door shut, fumbling with the lock. The hum vibrated through the floorboards, the voices now a chorus, echoing his name, promising oblivion. He pressed himself against the door, his breath coming in ragged gasps, staring out the window at the glowing lake, the swirling shapes growing. More defined, more monstrous. This wasn't just a quiet summer retreat. It was a hungry, ancient entity, and it wanted him. The summer was far from over, but for Elias, the nightmare had just begun. The old farmhouse stood baking under the relentless July sun, its white paint peeling like sunburnt skin, the windows staring out like vacant eyes. Liam had inherited it from a great aunt he barely remembered, and the promise of a quiet summer in the countryside had seemed idyllic. But as he stepped out of his air-conditioned car, the oppressive heat hit him, thick and still, carrying with it the faint, cloying scent of overripe peaches and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet, like old blood. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket, broken only by the buzzing of unseen insects and a distant, almost imperceptible hum that seemed to vibrate in his teeth. He tried to dismiss the growing unease as city nerves, the shock of rural isolation. Just the quiet, Liam, he muttered, his voice swallowed by the vast empty space. The farmhouse loomed, larger and more imposing than in the faded photographs. As he approached the front door, a faint, rhythmic creaking began from the porch. Swaying gently in a breeze that wasn't there. It was too regular, too deliberate, like someone was sitting there, rocking slowly, watching him. He froze, his hand on the rusty doorknob, a prickle of ice tracing its way down his spine despite the scorching heat. The interior was a time capsule, dust motes dancing in the shafts of sunlight that pierced the grimy windows. The air was stale, thick with the scent of aged wood and mothballs, but beneath it, that faint, sickly sweet aroma persisted. He spent the first day trying to air out the place, opening windows, but the oppressive stillness remained. He kept catching glimpses of movement in his peripheral vision. A shadow shifting in the hallway, a curtain fluttering when no window was open, but each time he turned, there was nothing. Just the silence and the faint, unsettling hum. That evening, as the sun bled into a bruised orange sunset, he found it. In the pantry, tucked behind a stack of dusty canning jars, was a small, crudely carved wooden bird. Its eyes, made of tiny, dark beads, seemed to follow him. Around its neck hung a faded, woven string, from which dangled a single dried sunflower seed. It felt oddly warm in his hand, almost pulsing with a faint, internal heat. He didn't remember his great-aunt having such an item, and its presence felt deeply out of place. A forgotten relic of something best left undisturbed. He called his sister, Chloe, his voice tight with an apprehension he couldn't quite articulate. "Chloe, this place, it's not right. There's this smell and a hum, and I just found this weird bird carving." Chloe, always the pragmatist, laughed. "Liam, it's an old house. It's going to have smells. And hums are probably the power lines. You're just being dramatic. Go get some fresh air." Her casual dismissal, while meant to reassure, only amplified his feeling of isolation and the growing conviction that something was truly amiss. That night, the hum intensified, a low, resonant thrum that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards, through his very bones. It was accompanied by a new sound, a soft, rhythmic scratching from beneath his bed, like tiny nails dragging across wood. He pulled back the covers, heart pounding, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Nothing. But as he lowered the light, he saw it. A single dried sunflower seed, identical to the one on the wooden bird, lying on the dusty floor directly beneath where his head had been. "Chloe, I swear, I'm not making this up," he whispered into the phone, his voice hoarse with fear. "The hum is louder, and there are these seeds. They're everywhere now." There was a pause on the other end, then Chloe's voice, softer now, laced with concern. "Liam, listen to me. The locals, they used to tell stories about that farm, about the sun-drenched silence. They said it takes things, small things at first, then bigger." Her words confirmed his deepest fears, giving a terrifying name to the unseen presence that had haunted his summer retreat. The next morning, the hum was almost deafening, a constant vibrating pressure in his skull. The sunflower seeds were now scattered throughout the house, forming intricate, swirling patterns on the floorboards, on the kitchen counter, even on his pillow. They seemed to pulse with the same faint warmth as the wooden bird. He walked to the window, staring out at the fields, and saw it. In the middle of the parched, cracked earth, a single, enormous sunflower, impossibly tall, its head turned directly towards the farmhouse, swaying gently, even though there was no wind. He stumbled back, gasping, the hum now a chorus of faint, ethereal whispers, woven into the melody of the sunflowers swaying. Join us. Grow, become one. They were soft, seductive, promising an end to his unease, a release into the warm, fertile earth. The air grew impossibly thick, heavy with the scent of peaches and blood, and the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to deepen, coalescing into indistinct shapes that shifted just as he glanced at them. Reaching, beckoning, he scrambled for the door, his hands fumbling with the lock. The hum vibrated through the entire house, the whispers now a chorus, echoing his name, promising oblivion. He burst out onto the porch, gasping for air, the sun-drenched fields stretching out before him, no longer a symbol of peace, but a vast, hungry entity. The colossal sunflower in the distance seemed to swell, its petals unfurling, and he could almost feel its roots reaching, burrowing beneath the earth towards him. The summer was far from over, but for Liam, the nightmare had just begun, and the silence was anything but golden. The old hunting lodge, tucked away in a forgotten corner of the sprawling Redwood National Park, was supposed to be a digital detox, a return to nature for Maya. But as she stepped out of her rental car, the towering redwoods, ancient and imposing, seemed to lean in, their branches weaving a canopy so dense that the summer sun struggled to penetrate, casting the forest floor in perpetual twilight. The air, thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, held a peculiar chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. A faint, almost imperceptible whisper seemed to drift through the colossal trees, a sound like dry leaves skittering across stone, even though there was no breeze. She tried to dismiss the growing unease as the natural awe inspired by such ancient giants, but the silence beneath the canopy was profound, a heavy, expectant stillness that seemed to absorb all sound, even her own breathing. The lodge itself, a rustic structure of dark wood and stone, felt less like a welcoming retreat and more like a sentinel, watching her with its dark, recessed windows. As she approached the heavy oak door, a single withered red rose petal, impossibly vibrant against the muted forest floor, lay directly on the welcome mat. It felt cold and brittle to the touch, like something preserved from a bygone era. The interior was surprisingly well maintained, but the air was heavy with the scent of pine and something else, something faintly metallic and sweet, like old, dried sap. She found herself constantly listening, her ears straining against the unnatural quiet. Every creak of the old lodge, every distant snap of a twig, sounded amplified, distorted. She kept catching glimpses of movement in the shadowy corners. A fleeting shadow, a curtain swaying when no window was open. But each time she turned, there was nothing. Just the silence and the persistent, dry whisper of the unseen wind through the pines. That evening, as the last sliver of light faded from the sky, a faint, melancholic tune began to drift through the lodge. It was a simple melody, played on what sounded like an old, out-of-tune music box, distant yet clear, emanating from somewhere deep within the forest. It was a child's lullaby, familiar yet twisted, imbued with a profound sadness that made the hair on her arms stand on end. She walked to the window, peering out into the impenetrable darkness, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She called her friend Ben, her voice tight with an apprehension she couldn't fully articulate. "Ben, I'm at the lodge. And it's weird. There's this music, like a music box, coming from the woods, and it's really quiet otherwise." Ben, ever the skeptic, chuckled. "Maya, it's a forest. Probably a neighbor with a radio. You're just not used to the country. Relax. Enjoy the peace and quiet." His casual dismissal, though well-intentioned, only amplified her feeling of isolation and the growing conviction that something was truly amiss. That night, the music intensified, growing louder, clearer, now accompanied by the faint, rhythmic sound of small, shuffling footsteps on the floorboards above her. She knew the lodge had no upstairs, just a high vaulted ceiling. She pulled the covers tighter, her heart hammering against her ribs, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Nothing. But as she lowered the light, she saw it, a single, withered red rose petal, identical to the one on the welcome mat, lying on the dusty floor directly beside her bed. "Ben, I swear, I'm not making this up," she whispered into the phone, her voice hoarse with fear. "The music is louder, and there are footsteps, and more of these rose petals." There was a long pause on the other end, then Ben's voice, softer now, laced with genuine concern. "Maya, listen to me. My grandmother used to tell stories about that part of the redwoods, about the whispering pines. They said a family disappeared there decades ago during a summer storm. A little girl, too. They said her toy music box was found, still playing years later." His words confirmed her deepest fears, giving a terrifying name to the unseen presence that had haunted her summer retreat. The next morning, the music was almost deafening, a constant, vibrating pressure in her skull. The rose petals were now scattered throughout the lodge, forming intricate, swirling patterns on the floorboards, on the kitchen counter, even on her pillow. They seemed to pulse with a faint, internal chill. She walked to the large picture window, staring out at the ancient redwoods, and saw it, deep within the impenetrable shadows of the forest. A faint, ethereal glow pulsed, a soft, beckoning light that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the music box. She stumbled back, gasping, the music now a chorus of faint, ethereal whispers, woven into the melody of the lullaby. "Play with us. Stay forever." They were soft, seductive, promising. An end to her unease, a release into the cool, dark embrace of the forest. The air grew impossibly thick, heavy with the scent of pine and old blood, and the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to deepen, coalescing into indistinct shapes that shifted just as she glanced at them, reaching, beckoning. She scrambled for the door, her hands fumbling with the lock. The music vibrated through the entire lodge, the whispers now a chorus, echoing her name, promising oblivion. She burst out onto the porch, gasping for air, the ancient redwoods towering over her. No longer a symbol of peace, but a vast, hungry entity. The ethereal glow in the distance seemed to brighten, pulsating rhythmically, and she could almost feel the ancient roots of the trees reaching, burrowing beneath the earth towards her. The summer was far from over, but for Maya, the nightmare had just begun, and the whispers of the pines were anything but benign.